Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Big Questions from the Pyramid in Warrington. I'm Mickey Campbell. Now, this is the Christian season of Epiphany, which is all about God revealing himself to us just as the Christ child was revealed to the three wise men. But as the frontiers of science advance faster and faster, less and less is regarded as the work of God. So this morning we are asking just one very big question. Is there any evidence for God? On our front rows we have some extremely distinguished scientists, Bible scholars, writers, men of the cloth, people whose experiences have changed their own minds about God, and they'll be cheered on and challenged by a very lively Warrington audience. Well, at CERN, they're closer to confirming the existence of the Higgs boson, the missing particle that would confirm the Big Bang theory of how the universe came into being. Last month, the Kepler space mission discovered a planet in another galaxy far away where life, but not as we know it, could conceivably exist. It's a rather different story to the one in Genesis. Is there any evidence for God? Dr. Andrew Pinsent, eminent physicist, as we can see, man of the cloth as well. Now, you accept the cosmology, you see the beauty in the cosmology, you accept evolution, how we came to be, and you believe in God.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, it's interesting you mentioned the Big Bang theory. The two most important theories of modern science, one is the Big Bang and the other is genetics. And it's often a surprise to many people they were both invented by men of the cloth. Georges Lemaitre, the inventor of the Big Bang theory, was a Catholic priest from Belgium, and Gregor Mendel, the founder of genetics, was a monk. So clearly they didn't see any intrinsic problem or of a conflict between science and religion. And there's one other thing about this story most people don't know. Both theories were rejected in the Soviet Union, the world's first atheist state, and they were banned for a number of decades. So it's interesting people think there's an intrinsic conflict, but the lesson of history is often rather different.
There is this God of the gaps idea, though, isn't there? We used to think lightning was caused by God and thunder and earthquakes. Now we know it's tectonic plates. Evolution is a good example. We know about speciation and all the many species that we have, and also the plane of the spheres. And you can put that down to God. We now know it was to do with gravity. And yet the problem is, if you ascribe anything to God, once science finds out what did cause it, God is gone.
No, it depends how you think God interacts with the world and your image of God. So I think some people used to think God was like a watchmaker and doing every fine detail. But the image in a lot of mainstream Christianity is much more that God is like a gardener cultivating the world and allowing the world to develop through its own causation and changes. And that idea about how God interacts with the world was very important, in fact, for the origins of modern science.
Eminent scientists, intelligent people who believe in God, Peter Atkins, what are you missing? What are you not getting here?
Well, I think there's a huge amount of evidence for God in the natural world. But it's evidence for lazy...
Steady, not yet.
No,
I feel there's a but coming.
Yeah, the second part of that remark is that it's evidence for lazy minds. And what we have to look at is the surge that science has made in our understanding of the world. For thousands of years, people lay back and said, oh, God must have done it. And in a sense, that was good, because they were questioning and looking for answers, but they were going down the wrong path. 300 years ago, and it really is only 300 years, and think of the progress we've made in that time. Mankind, to its great credit, stumbled on the scientific method. And all the great questions of existence which were being answered or being probed by religion suddenly became open to the scientific method. And it's quite extraordinary what progress we're making. And not one iota of that progress needs to call upon the concept of God. So God is driven right back into virtually a point, and we don't need him anymore.
What then, Dr. Andrew Pinsent, can only be explained by God?
Well, certainly I reject a God of the gaps, in that case like Peter Atkins. But I think, nevertheless, civilizations that have believed in God have often been very interested in the big questions, in the search for ultimate causes.
And science owes them a debt.
Can I just finish? But of course, in civilizations which have turned to materialism, which have turned to saying there is no God and there's nothing other than the material world, they only measure goods by material things. So a lot of universities now are under attack because they're regarded as doing a lot of useless things. Why aren't they generating stuff for industry or for business and so on? And unless we keep alive an idea that we're searching for things which are immaterial, for the big questions, then we won't actually also make progress in science as well.
But you mentioned the Big Bang, and
yes.
that's a material happening.
But aren't you simply saying
David Aaronovitch.
you prefer a society in which people believe in God? You're not actually suggesting there is any evidence for God. If you look at the question in an anthropological way, in other words, you look at the way in which human beings organise themselves, there is a practically universal demand for a causal story, a foundation myth, which differs from place to place and which are usually actually mutually exclusive. They can't all be true because they depend upon their components which are exclusive to themselves. And then also a religious dimension in order to create some form of cultural practices which regulate society. Morality, ethics and so on, which a lot of which predate the organisations of modern states to do that kind of thing for you. In other words, the evidence is that man creates God and continues to create God.
Charles Foster. Morality comes from the fact, according to David and many people, that it was advantageous to us as a tribe. And so we formed rules which stopped us killing each other, and then we survived and we bred.
David's absolutely right. We all need a creation myth. That's the fact that we want that, the fact that we need it, is itself a tremendously suggestive thing. You might want to ask yourself, more cogently than you have, why that should be the case. The search for origins suggests that there might be an origin beyond ourselves. In relation to the quest for morality, one of the strangest and, for biologists, most puzzling of all things about the natural world is the kindness of strangers. The fact of altruism, which is everywhere in the world. Now, there are lots of attempts by biologists to explain this curious fact away. So kin selection, for example, the notion that if I'm sufficiently closely related to you, I will die in order to save you, in order to allow to carry on in the gene pool,
might be in our interest.
That amount of shared
that might
DNA.
be in our interests.
Now, of course, it's perfectly true that once you've got altruism and cooperation seeded into a community, it confers a massive selective advantage. The question which you need to address yourself to is, how did natural selection allow that seed to be planted in the first place? Natural selection is very effective in going around stamping on the seeds of altruism before they jump up.
It's not a seed in the first place. It's a gradual growth of usefulness. So there's no seed planted, but you suddenly discover, you make a mistake, what you think is perhaps a mistake, and it turns out to enhance your survival. And that gets welded into the ethological system.
Peter, I'm sure that you know how dismal the existing biological explanations for altruism are.
Doesn't mean to say that they're wrong.
It implies, in the case of reciprocal altruism, for example, the notion that I scratch my back because you'll scratch me back, a tremendously sophisticated calculation of benefit and detriment.
Let me bring Diana in here, because you're an evolutionary biologist, and this is just your area.
This is my area. So there's a great deal of evidence about kin selection, about reciprocal altruism, but we evolved in very small-scale societies in which every interaction was face-to-face. And certainly, if you look at biblical texts, if you look at even other religions, it's perfectly fine to kill out-group members, but it's not okay to kill in-group members. And if you look at how people act towards one another in one-off interactions, people aren't very nice. There's a lot of reinforcement in society and punishment for people who aren't nice to each other. The society and the rules of society have been built around our evolved psychology, which enables altruism to be possible. For instance, in the military, brothers in arms. That is a way of leveraging kin selection to make people altruistic. And the whole idea that you were saying before, that biology, the fact that we all have an origin story, means that there must be something true about it. Well, I think this chair is solid, but now physics has shown that there's a tremendous amount of space between atoms. The smartest species on this planet are all social group species, and what happens is you have to get smart in order to be able to infer the mental states of other animals. Now, if you take that and try to explain the world that way, you will think that there's a universal consciousness that governs the world. So what we're doing is we're using our mind, which is like a hammer, to see the world like a nail. Our mind is good at inferring consciousness, therefore we're inferring consciousness in the world.
In a minute, Charles.
You've given a very compelling account of how once the notion of altruism exists in a society or in a community of any sort, it can generate and proliferate. What you fail to give is an account of how it was seeded in the first place. And that's what I'm on about.
Everyone drifts into doing something, and sometimes that something turns out to enhance survival. Everything in biology is a mistake.
How do we discover a cup of tea? How do we imagine that the first cup of tea, as we now know it, came to exist? It came to exist by a whole series of really absurd accidents. There's nothing obvious about the tea plant that says, take this, infuse it with water, add some milk to it, and if you like, a little bit of sugar from completely different...
But hang on, let's just concentrate on this idea, Pete. Consciousness, for example. The late, great Christopher Hitchens, great atheistic thinker, he said, I remember I saw him on YouTube saying it, that there's only something like half a chromosome difference between us and the chimps. Yeah. But that half chromosome is just a fantastically significant, amazing difference.
Yeah. Chimps also don't, I mean, chimps can go to war with one another, but within their own in-group, it's very rare that they kill each other. They kill monkeys.
No, but they don't have our levels of consciousness and art and
morality. Yeah, they don't have their levels
morality.
of consciousness, but you could say, why don't they all kill each other? They must have been endowed with God, with an altruistic motivation. Ants will sacrifice themselves for the greater good of the colony. They must have been endowed with by God with an altruistic motivation. People didn't understand how eusocial insects work until very recently, and just because we don't understand how altruism might have been seeded in our human species doesn't mean that it has been endowed by anyone else.
But they don't talk about things...
That is a great example of a God of the gaps argument.
They don't talk...
altruism argument.
Peter Atkins, they don't talk about things that they can't see. That's the point. They don't sit here, we're having a good go at it, but chimps couldn't do it any better than us, certainly right now this morning. Our consciousness is extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's because it's grown with time. And I think what you have to do is to look also, the same question comes into the question of the origins of morals. And I think to understand the ethical system, you can either say God sort of set an example, or you can say, look back over our evolutionary history to see what infrastructure has emerged, but then couple that with our big brains and our ability to reflect under certain circumstances on the consequences of our actions. So there's nothing mysterious about it. It's really the emergence of understanding that we're talking about.
Adam Deen, Muslim philosopher.
I think appealing to evolution to answer this question, if God exists, is a red herring, because it commits the genetic fallacy, which is to invalidate a view, looking at, analysing how it originates. It will not enlighten us whether God exists or not. And one could even argue that atheism can be explained for psychological reasons. We can say that they have father issues, and they see God as the father figure, and they want to deny God's existence.
Would be true of some atheists.
Yes, but it wouldn't enlighten us if God exists or not.
What's the greatest piece of evidence that you can bring to the table today?
Well, for me personally, I think the origin of the universe. I think
the Big Bang.
The Big Bang. I think if we probe the observable universe, we will find transcendent signposts. Science will never be able to explain...
the universe.
Science will never be able to explain how something can come from nothing.
Why not?
Because
you see, that's the
science only works in a physical realm. I mean, it can only explain to you how one physical process can happen to another physical process governed by natural law.
But you can never explain how God came into existence.
The Big Bang, if I may finish, is the literal origin of all space and time. Now, suppose, whilst we're speaking now, you hear a loud bang.
You're wrong.
And, sorry, if I can just finish. You hear a loud bang, and then we ask the question, what caused that bang? And Peter says it happened by itself. No one is going to accept that. That would be an unintelligible response.
But why not?
The same reason applies to the Big Bang. If there is a cause for the little bang, there's a cause for the Big Bang.
You see, this is a typical anthropomorphic argument. What you're doing is you're saying, look, we understand in this universe that A causes B, B causes C. And so you trace it back, and you trace it back to a time, if you can use that expression, before the laws of science actually existed. It is improper to extrapolate your experience of causality in this universe to before when the universe existed. It's so naive.
So then how can you then argue?
But let's let Adam come back. Pastor, I will come to you forthwith. But let's, Adam...
So then how can you argue that science will come with an explanation of how the universe comes into existence?
Look how
if there are no laws, there's no physical reality.
Look how far science has come with understanding the nature of the universe back to a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang in the past 100 years compared with the progress that the likes of you made, I speak very kindly, over the past 3,000 years.
That science will explain something from coming from nothing.
I see very...
To believe
No,
that something... That's worse than magic.
No. So what
You're advocating magic.
So this is the uncaused cause or whatever. Yeah, the first cause... What caused the causer?
We, as rational beings, we know that whatever begins to exist needs a cause.
Right.
And the universe began
what
to
caused
exist.
God?
Well, that's a ridiculous question of why. That's like saying, what caused and uncaused?
David Aaronovitch.
Well, I mean, straightforward on a logical basis, if everything has to have a cause, then something would have had to have created the thing that caused the cause.
That's the caricature.
So actually you end up in exactly the same position as anybody else does with the fact that you don't actually know. The difference between us is that you have a great kind of collection of intuitions which people have come to and causal arguments, a little bit like my belief that if I listen to Tottenham Hotspur on the radio, they will lose. This is my superstition. Or my daughters believe that those strange things on the pavement, if you walk on them, it will cause you bad luck, or any other kind of superstitions. You require a causal link, and you have attached to that an incredible superstructure of religious and cultural thought which you adduce to be true. Now, by and large, that is no great problem to me, and so on, but it is a great problem to you.
I think this is the big problem in it.
Francesca,
it illustrates...
biblical scholar.
Thank you. It illustrates, I think, this major misunderstanding about what the main Western monotheistic faiths and their creation stories are all about. What we're dealing with, it seems to me, are Muslims, Jews and Christians in a modern, contemporary, Western, intellectualised mindset who want to engage with science and want to engage with telescopes that look deep, deep, deep into the universe past. But the fact is that their religion and their faith commitments are based on ancient texts from ancient societies.
Which is supported by modern science, which is supported by the Big Bang, the initial conditions of the universe.
Can I finish? These texts weren't produced by societies that were ever interested...
And religion.
Can I finish?
You may.
Thanks. These texts weren't produced by societies that were ever interested in an original question, where are we all from? Not even in the Quran. I mean, to be honest, a lot of these traditions about creation, don't image creation as a one-off event at the beginning of time.
God speaks
it shows creation as happening over and over and over and over
Mohammed,
again.
what is your greatest Mohammed habitat? What is your greatest piece of evidence that you can adduce for God?
Yeah. Before that, let's talk about the Big Bang, please. Yes, the Big Bang,
okay.
Because to say that theories like the Big Bang is in the ancient books, that's not true. The Big Bang is not mentioned in either the Old or the New Testament. It's only mentioned in the Quran. The difference in the Quranic Big Bang and the scientific Big Bang is as follows. The Big Bang in science, and modern day science, is a bang that happened that the whole universe was a single entity that exploded. While in the Quran tells us that the whole universe was a single entity, and then God caused it to explode, but with controlled. It was controlled explosion.
We're onto something, right.
So this, excuse me, let me finish. So this controlled explosion leads to a known result. While every other explosion we know, every bang we know, leads to destruction and no known results. So when we bang the Hiroshima, no new...
Andrew Pinsent, you're a physicist, is he right?
I can't comment. I'm not a Quranic expert, so I can't comment on
the physics, though.
On the physics.
Controlled or uncontrolled.
I think the key battleground about evidence for God using reason is really in the area of philosophy more than science. And science shades off into philosophy at some point. But that's where the real battleground is. So it's slightly, people tend to argue past one another a little bit when it comes to just science alone.
But isn't that idea of the cosmological constant? It's this number, this tuning that has to be right within something like 120 decimal places. Is that not a real problem for you, Peter?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a real problem, and we think we understand the nature of it as well. The point about scientific approach to understanding the origin of the universe is is that it
the fine-tuning of the universe.
It simplifies the kind of questions that one should ask in the expectation of getting answers. And one of them is the fine-tuning. Another is to say, well, okay, a lot of energy had to be made at the inception of the universe. How much energy was made? And science, what science does and what religion does not, is to provide an answer to that second question. And it says the amount of wait, let Peter finish. The amount of energy that had to be created at the beginning was absolutely zero. So if you extrapolate that to the amount of work that God had to do at the time, you can see that he didn't have to do anything at all. What science is doing is really getting to the core of what actually happened on day dot.
There's a false dichotomy. If you're an atheist, you somehow support the progress of science. If you're a theist, then you want to quash it. No.
Well, no, that's not the case. He's a scientist.
Well, yeah, they seem to be on that
science. They accept evolution. They
Absolutely. So what we're saying here, as a theist, what we're saying is that as a theist, we hold that the universe has an origin, and the universe was fine-tuned for the existence of intelligent life. And anyone who holds that falls within mainstream science. Of course, these achievements are tentative, and they're open to change. But at the current moment, everything points to God.
No, it doesn't, because there are there are many explanations of why why the universe is fine-tuned for life. One point is that a universe couldn't come into existence except with the fundamental constants that we've now got.
But that's begging the question, Peter.
And it's just
begging the question. Why were they fine-tuned?
And it is just a happy accident.
Did we just get lucky then?
We just got lucky. Another one, which is actually gaining ground, is that
so what we have...
Let them finish.
Is that there are trillions and trillions.
So we have chance of the gaps rather than God of the gaps.
Please be quiet while I'm trying to put you right. That there are trillions and trillions and trillions of universes, each with it may be a different mix of fundamental constants. And it is not in the least surprising that one of these turns out to be appropriate for life.
Okay, well, let's talk about God in our... I just wonder, there's something else here. I know, Diana, you're desperate to get in, but... And you can address this question as well. Let's move on to God in our everyday lives. I mean, that was fascinating. But God in our... I just wonder...
That's exactly what I was
David, let's consider this, if you will. David, I'll get you to answer this question. There are moments, and we all have them, when we look at someone we love and we just feel elevated. We feel a sublime, transcendent... I saw it when Peter was looking across at Adam there. No, but we feel a sublime, transcendent moment, or we see something utterly beautiful, and we feel something incredible. Is that... Some people think that is when we're close to God.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot. I mean, I was recently in hospital and I went bonkers for 4 days. I had 4 days of delusions. Those delusions to me were utterly and completely real. The mind is an absolutely extraordinary thing. And it's hugely varied, it's incredibly evolved, and it is far more flexible than people believe.
But that feeling of sheer love and transcendent beauty.
Well, sometimes you feel that. Sometimes you feel, my God, it's a horrible, bloody rainy day and I wish I wasn't going out in it. And that person is really getting on my nerves and so on. The moments we don't talk about. So why should we ascribe God to the moment when we feel that kind of moment of love and not God also to that moment where we feel pretty crappy, for instance, which is also quite a lot of the things that we feel. I don't feel the need, in a sense, in other words, when I feel good, to think, I feel really good, somebody must have given that to me.
I'm not just talking about... It's not just feeling good, is it?
No.
It's not... Explain to him.
I think in practice, for many of us, certainly for myself, a sense of awe in studying the cosmos is often the beginning of a movement towards a faith. And certainly for myself, studying certain objects in mathematics and science, particularly particle physics, gave me an extraordinary sense of order.
What's interesting to me is why you need that.
That's not enough to convert someone, but often it's enough to start moving someone. But what often, for me personally, it's not just the sense of awe, but also the sense of the fruitfulness in the world. And,
what about the death and the famine and the disease and the murder?
I'm talking about the fruitfulness of faith in so many areas, in art and in music, and in particular the lives of the saints, because every now and again we produce extraordinary individuals who, I suppose, and now I'm putting on my theologian's hat, who sort of show the face of God in some way or other.
But we produce extraordinary individuals who are not
amazing.
saints, don't we? We produce lots and lots of, in fact, many more extraordinary individuals who are not saints.
Martin Luther King was no saint, but he was an extraordinary individual.
No saint.
Yes.
Go on.
Well, I just want to, because, sorry, lots of people across the room have been talking about the idea that the Big Bang and some of science, that God might be guiding this. And I just think if God is somehow guiding evolution and the development of the Earth and all the planets, could he not have guided it in a way that had a little bit less famine and that didn't have motor neuron disease and cancer and all these other things?
Why is that, Pastor? Because you address this issue, don't you? Why did God create, E. coli and horrible diseases and parasites that burrow into the eyes of children in sub-Saharan Africa? Why did God create those things?
Well, I believe that God exists, but there's also, we need to look at the argument from the idea of also the spiritual side. We don't just look at the physical side. If we argue from just the physical side, we have a truncated view of reality and of the word, because there's a spiritual reality, there's also a physical reality. Okay? And so the evil that we see in the world, according to what I know from the biblical record, is that there is an evil. Evil is real. There is Satan, there is a devil.
Why do
children get
leukemia?
Illness and sicknesses and evil are coming away. It came because of sin.
Because of sin?
Because of sin. In God there is no sin in God. God is pure, God is holy.
So is God punishing us for...
God allows things to happen in our lives.
You don't like this, Stephen, do you?
No, I don't. I'm happy on two fronts. First of all, that those, if you like, who are opposed to God are trying to put my understanding of God into a particular box where he's got anthropomorphic character, where he's a guy in the sky almost, and I'm not interested in that at all.
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, just a second, let me just finish. And secondly, there is a desire somehow or other to make God into somebody who directly intervenes in the world day by day and does things to people. No, he doesn't. That's not the way in which my understanding of ultimate reality,
how on earth
which
did
is God,
atheists get the impression that religious people believe that?
Because some religious people do believe that.
And
some other religious people don't believe
it. The Bible actually...
Does he answer prayers?
He does.
Does he answer prayers?
In the way in which I understand God acting, yes, he does, because he works within me to enable me to perhaps be a better person than actually I am. He works through the arrows, in a sense, of goodness, truth, beauty, love, etc., which are the way in which make up that ultimate reality which I understand to be God.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Reverend Kim Go, who was he was a former Triad gangster. He's now a Methodist minister. He went to prison. 357 counts. Put your hands together for him. He found Jesus. And Jesus changed your life. The first time you were in prison, God spoke to you, didn't he?
Yes, he sure did.
Literally?
And I wasn't looking for religion. The last thing I want to know is Christianity, God. Look after number one. But guess what? I swore at him, and he spoke to me. It's just like an atheist. What do you believe in? Can I pose that question to you, Deen? What does atheists believe in?
Well, no, I don't believe there's a God. Right. It's an absence of belief.
Atheists don't believe in anything, right? Nothing. Hang on. I'm speaking. I didn't interrupt you when you speak. Please.
You wanted to.
Atheists believe in nothing. Is it still something they believe in? Nothing.
When you say God spoke to you, what do you mean? Did you hear his voice?
Yes, just like you and me talking, and I thought I was hallucinating.
Maybe you were hallucinating.
It sounded like you talking to me.
Okay, what did it sound like?
Like we're having a conversation, a voice.
What language was he speaking?
English.
I was speaking to me in English. I was effing him in English.
Was it a soft voice? Was it a loud voice, an insistent voice?
No, it wasn't loud. It's no thunder and lightning. It's like a normal conversation.
What did he say?
Well, because I was effing at him, because of the vicar or the chaplain, and then he said, why are you swearing at me? And I thought for a moment, one of the other convicts over there was a ventriloquist.
Which he might have been.
So I was about to arrange their face. And And I look around and they were doing their own thing, smoking or, you know, talking.
Yeah.
So I have another go at him. And I believe he got up from the wrong side of the bed that morning. He took offense to me swearing. Of course, a lot of people swear.
But what was the feeling that you had at that moment?
Let me explain the feeling. When I swear a second time, he said, look, why are you swearing at me? Is it me or the chaplain who was impatient with you?
Mm-hmm.
Next thing I know, I was on my knees. I didn't want to cry. Tears were running down. But I was feeling this simultaneous emotion at the same time. A feeling of, you know, sadness and a feeling of joy.
And this has revolutionized your life. You're a different person.
It has. And I could not explain until today why I'm able to have a simultaneous emotional feeling of joy and sadness at the same time. You try it yourself. Any of you can do that and prove it to me.
Sorry, it was a shame that God didn't show up before you committed all those crimes.
But listen, you've got them all going. Look at this. Peter Atkins. Peter Atkins.
How would you tell the difference between...
Oh, you try and smoke wacky in the prison. See if you can get it.
How would you tell... How would you tell the difference between your experience and a hallucination?
How am I going to hallucinate? Can you hallucinate now for me? I don't take no drugs then. In the prison, I got no drinks, alcohol, nothing. And I was in a mood of anger at the vicar.
Yeah, it's called hallucination.
Why would I want to...
as a result of it, though, your life has been utterly transformed.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. And you're a preacher. Yeah.
I am.
Okay, David, go on.
Why are you so reluctant to acknowledge the possibility of hallucination? As I said, I had 4 days of
I've hallucinated before.
No.
I've taken LSD before.
I know, but answer me.
I know what hallucination.
But answer me this, because I spent 4 days hallucinating. I thought the nurses in the hospital were going to kill me. Then I thought they were going to eat me. I thought the people who didn't exist in the next bed were plotting to have me taken away and murdered and so on. I absolutely believe this. I believe this as firmly as I believe that I'm speaking to you now. It wasn't until afterwards that I could understand that these were actually hallucinations. In other words, all I'm saying is that the mind is an extraordinary
thing. That was post-operative psychosis that you had, wasn't it? But Francesca, in the Bible, if we read, you know, if any Christian, any believer read an account such as Kim's in the Bible, they would say, God spoke to him, yeah. But now there's a sort of a level of scepticism about it.
Because my story is mine. Who are you to tell me my story is not true? None of you could do that.
Francesca,
can I tell you about your life is false?
Myriad examples in the Bible. Wait a minute. Myriad examples in the Bible of God speaking directly to people, as Kim claims God spoke directly to him, aren't there?
And given that they're in the Bible, these people and their experiences, which I think broadly are primarily fictitious, but these people and their experiences are therefore special, and they become special in tradition, and they become special in the community. And I think to a certain degree, modern days people's experience of God speaking to them makes them feel special as well. And that's not to judge it, it's simply to say that it sets you out, it sets you apart from the rest.
The way I arrived at atheism was I took a course, it's called the Psychoanalytic Study of Society, and they told us the delusions of a man named Schreber, who was a German judge, and he thought that God was going to make him a woman and inseminate him, and he showed me the allegories between the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary and this man's account of how God was going to inseminate him so he could bring forth a new race of human beings. And the delusion, the schizophrenic delusion, and the story of the Annunciation were so similar that I realized that the human mind can fabricate, and I'm really glad it had such a wonderful effect on your life.
And I know David Koresh.
I think it's quite important to avoid labels like schizophrenia. I think
But Mohammed believed clearly when he went, if you believe that it's the word of God, you believe it's the word of God. But if you don't, you've got to say that he believed it, didn't he? That he was getting...
Well, exactly, but that's the key point. It's about interpretation. You don't have to label it as hallucination or schizophrenia if people have this experience. What seems to be important, I think, in terms of maintaining everybody's dignity and respecting everyone's religious positions, is that this is about interpretation. And your interpretation of what you experience might be very different from somebody else in that experience who may interpret it very differently.
But you actually said it was fictitious.
I said
primarily fictitious.
The stories are fictitious.
The stories are fictitious. You're actually saying that people's stories within the Bible are fictitious.
Well, I'm not saying that eyewitness accounts, no.
No, you know, I think you'll be very careful about using that sort of language, because those stories of people's experience, for example, of Jesus and what he did and the way he lived, people's experience of God within the latter part of the New Testament, were real to them and important to them, and you're saying they're fictitious, they're rubbish, they're lies.
I think that they're fictitious. Not factual. I didn't say that.
Well, okay, but you've got to be very careful, I think, as a biblical scholar, of saying that they are fictitious.
Only a few minutes ago, I'm sorry, but only a few minutes ago, you were saying that you didn't believe in a God who intervened, and you didn't believe in this, and you didn't believe in this, and that it was we shouldn't anthropomorphise God, and that we were putting people in boxes, and we shouldn't do this. And now you're talking about stories in the Bible being literally true. Stories in the Bible about prophets, about people meeting God, about miracles being performed, virgin births. I mean, either these things are literally true, and we've got an interventionist God, or we haven't.
No, I don't actually believe we have got an interventionist God, but I will...
So they are fictitious.
So it's fiction in the Bible, exactly as Francesca
I
said.
actually will allow people their own experience and the right to have their own experience and that being true to them. And in my own life, there have been things that may have happened to me, which I feel are important to me, but have pointed, in a sense, I like to think of a whole load of arrows that have helped get me to a disclosure situation where actually I suddenly take the decision, actually I do believe in this God.
But
Some days I don't believe quite so much. But other days I do, because there's enough there to make me jump over that particular thing.
Scientists will tell us that we are pattern-seeking mammals. We look for reasons and we look for patterns. But it's interesting what you said there was some days you believe less than others.
Yes,
what makes you not believe?
I think, like, any person who is searching for faith, and I hope I'm still searching for faith, you constantly try to listen to those who disagree with you. You try and grow in your faith. You try and learn more about your faith.
Why do you search for...
Because
I search for it?
Because I believe that I have a spiritual dimension within me which needs to be fed, and that's one of the important things.
But that's exactly a huge... Because this is the thing, and lots of people feel like there's a gap in their lives, and if that happens to be a gap that God happens to fit, well, that's evidence for God.
I don't
but that's
actually
not
feel
true.
a gap.
Let me finish. The existence of a gap doesn't mean that something exists to fill that gap. That's the argument that says every colander is a bowl. It's not. Some gaps are just gaps, and yes, we all feel emptiness sometimes. That doesn't mean there's a God.
David, what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, I find this takes it back to the human need for the thing rather than the thing itself. You have decided to search for it. Hardly surprisingly, quite often you find it because you are actively searching for it. And in a way, that's what the distinction here in this discussion is about. You, on this side, you're always searching for the thing. You lean towards it, you want it to be, you conjure it into existence, you will do everything that you can to do that. Because myself, I'm speaking to that, and actually, quite often you do no harm in doing that. Sometimes you do, often that you don't. Myself, I don't have that need, so I don't search for it, neither do I feel the need to search against it.
That's fine, David, that belongs to you, but I actually have experienced in my life sometimes transcendence, some sense of the other.
Is that what we were talking about earlier on?
Some sense of God, something which is out beyond me, something which you might describe as ultimate reality. That has become real to me.
What is that feeling? What is that feeling? What is that feeling? It was looking at a thing of great beauty or love, the feeling of love, is it what we were trying to...
Actually, sometimes being taken out of myself by beautiful music, which has taken me way beyond any understanding, taken me to a different place, elevated me in a way that's closer to God. Sometimes when I've sat in a beautiful place in the country and actually thought, what is all this about?
Touched by God.
I have felt something which is beyond me, something of the ultimate reality.
Peter Atkins.
Do you think that we atheists do not feel the same sense of grandeur and wonder at the world? Of course we do.
Of course you do. Fine, absolutely. And that's led me down my road and it's led you down your road. But what's the problem?
But instead of...
Well, wait a minute, Kate. When he feels that sense of wonder, is he touched by God? And he doesn't know it.
That's up to him to decide whether he does or not.
We're looking for truth. And it's either...
So am I.
No, you're looking for truth inside yourself.
I'm looking for truth too. I'm engaged in a search around this issue. You also are engaged in the same search. You come to a different conclusion.
Patsy, Jesus found you as well, didn't he? Because through a tragedy that would be so difficult. Patsy's son was shot. Dory. Sorry, what? Sorry.
Was it Jesus who found her or God? Sorry.
Well, now we're into a theological issue between Islam and Christianity about the Holy Trinity and the single God, which we're not actually debating this morning, but Mohammed, I appreciate your contribution. Patsy, so Dory was shot, and it would shake the faith of many people, but your life was transformed. You believe it was for a reason.
Yeah, I do believe that my life was transformed after the death of my son, but I believe I actually was getting there before that. I had different experiences in my life because I believe in God, I believe he exists, and I believe what the Bible tells me. What other people believe is their, that's their way of living, okay? And no one can tell me what I believe isn't true, and I'm not telling anyone else what they believe isn't true, because I think God is it's a personal thing about God for me. So when my son was shot and killed, I was asking the God that I believed in, well, couldn't you save him? Couldn't you, do something? Why is he dead? But because I have faith, and one of the verses in the Bible that actually kind of got a hold of me. It said, I think it's in Romans, it said, all things are working together for the good of those who love God. And I know I was a person who loved him, even though some people don't think he exists. I know he exists, because he speaks to me as well. We have conversations on a daily basis.
What do you mean? Can I explore that a little bit with you?
Well, I talk to him about my own personal life, and he talks to me about things, and he reveals things to me, and I will say things to people, and they said, how did you know that? So I believe that's God doing that for me.
Do you hear a voice, or is it something more subtle than that?
It's, I think that the odd times it's more from within.
From a feeling?
Not a feeling, it's a talk. It's like you having a conversation with someone and you're hearing their voice.
Okay.
Do you get me saying? That's for me anyway. So when I looked at what has happened after that, obviously I was in pain. I really believe everything...
Where was he when Dory was shot? Where was God?
Where was he? I think I was asked that question once before by a television person, and I said right where he was when his son was being crucified for the sins of the world. Exactly the same place. So what I'm saying is that that's where he is and that's where he is. But I personally believe that the earth actually belongs to us. Okay? And we have dominion and authority. But not only that, we are like God. That's what I believe. We are like God.
Why do tsunamis happen? What about the tsunami, for example?
Well, I really believe, again, it has to do with us, because we are kind of, according to the word, and that's what I believe, we are in charge of down here. Yeah? And we have a choice. Psalms 82 said, ye are gods, but you will die like men. So it's really important for me that we recognize that everything we speak and everything we say, we are creating all the time. Some people don't believe that. But I believe we are creating. We create with our lips and with our words, just like the Genesis says, and God spoke, and it was so. Do you see what I mean?
Did Dory have to die for this to happen?
I don't say he had to die. Everyone's going to die anyway. And there's nobody here, when we came into the world, it said, well, you've got 2 years to live or 4 years to live. We don't know that. And we know everyone's going to die. That's where we're going. And for the Christians, we say death is the best thing. So, if when we die, we're going back to where we came from. So if that is so, and that's what I believe, then I really believe everything is working, and it's working. There's a plan and a purpose.
And of course, one day you believe that you'll be reunited with your son.
Oh, I do believe that. Yeah. It's amazingly, because soon after he died, I remember I was in the back garden doing something, and all of a sudden I heard his voice. And he says, Mummy, why are you so sad? And I said, I looked round first of all, he's just, died maybe a couple of weeks ago. And then I said, because I miss you. And he said, I'm fine, I'm all right. And that actually gave me another kind of a peace within me, and to go forward, to do the things that I need to do. And I'm here today because my son died. I really wouldn't be here. I really wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing. I would be sat in church, doing what would normally do to church, go to church, read the Bible, pray.
And you're helping guys reform.
Yes. So I really believe there is a God. There's no doubt about it. As far as I'm concerned.
And Diana, she's inferred from what's happened that there's been a reason, right?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful story, and I think that if that's improved your life, that's fine. For me, I actually don't have any problem with people being religious unless it keeps them from understanding the world rationally if it prevents them. And then I also think that religion, in a certain way, really encourages a certain kind of good behavior, but not other kinds of good behavior. I think religious morality is very circumscribed, and I think that religious people are often good to other religious people within their faith, but they're often not good to other people. They're not good to animals. And these are the things that are important to me.
I'm not religious.
You're not
I don't
religious.
believe. No, I don't believe in religion. I believe in God. And for me, God is God. I don't believe in religion.
Yes.
Religion has caused too much problems. I believe in God, and that's what I believe. I believe Jesus died for me, and that's what I believe. What other people believe is up to them, but we'll find out sooner or later when we die. Is that right? I believe that.
You can believe in something that isn't true, and it can be a source of great strength. So this is not evidence for the existence of God.
No, I'm not saying it's evidence. I'm not giving evidence here. I'm not giving evidence. I'm telling you of my personal experience and what I believe. I'm not here to prove anything or give evidence.
Everyone on the front bench there is believing in something that is not
true. Everyone over there is believing in something as well. We all believe in something.
Any hands up? Yes, sir. What would you like to say? Good morning. Hello. Hi.
I was just going to say 2 points about this evidence, if there's a God here. I was just going to ask, some things exist outside the realms of science and understanding because we haven't found out about it yet. You know, the planet that was recently found out.
Kepler 22b.
Yeah. It didn't just suddenly magically appear. It always existed, but it just took our time for us to find it. I think God is basically the same thing. It doesn't need our belief or our thinking. He is real. We just have to find him.
Do you think God created... The gentleman there has raised a fascinating point, and I'm going to come to other people in the audience with your hands up. But if there were to be life elsewhere, Kepler 22b or Kepler 22c or wherever, did God create that life as well?
Oh, well, actually,
is he their God too?
Well, C.S. Lewis wrote a very good essay about this called Religion and Rocketry. He goes through all the issues. I think the main concerns of us, for ourselves, are whether there's life out there which is intelligent and which also suffers from original sin, because then we've got problems on our hands if they're more technologically advanced than we are.
Because they're coming to get us.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, I think people naively think if we make more scientific or technical progress, as they imagine advanced civilization to be, they automatically become better, and that's not necessarily the case. That's where the moral issues come back in.
Right. Okay.
So for my,
yes. Over here, madam. Yeah. Morning.
I was just going to say on the point of the Bible and whether it's fictitious or not. Whether or not it's fictitious is irrelevant because it's been edited, translated. And as a writer myself, I know how important that is to the meaning of text. Now, meaning can be twisted and convoluted as a form of control. And that's what I kind of believe organised religion is. It's not to say you can't be spiritual, but you can be spiritual without God. I am in awe of the universe. I think it's an amazing place. But why do I need to believe it was created by something?
Well, of course, Mohammed, I know what you're saying. Your eyes are twinkling there. You're going to say that the Bible is edited and stitched together, but you're going to say that the Quran is unaltered.
Absolutely right.
The Word of God.
The Word of God. And it is there to prove it isn't. It's very easy to prove that the Bible is not the Word of God, because at least we have more than one Bible. So they are disputing with each other. While the Quran, excuse me, but while the Quran, it says in it many times, this is the Word of God, and prove it is not. It has no contradiction.
Okay, Kay wants to have a go at the Quran, and I wish her good luck. But first of all, all right, okay, finish your point.
Yeah. The Quran is the only book in the world that says, this is the book of God. By the way, the Bible doesn't say that. It says, this is the book of God. Has it not been from God, it would have had many contradictions and discrepancies.
It has tons. Yeah.
That's what it says. Has it not been from God, it would have had many discrepancies and contradictions.
Have loads of discrepancies and contradictions.
Only God, as an author, can say this. No other human can claim this, because once you find one mistake in it, and when you find contradiction, that you have broken the link there. But then we have the book of God, and then it describes himself and tells a lot of things. So far, we have found nothing wrong with this book.
There should be no...
Okay, sorry,
Guy, first of all.
Go on, Guy.
2 mistakes in the Quran. Number 1, the Trinity does not include the Virgin Mary. And number 2, Mary the mother of Jesus is not the same person as Miriam, the sister of Aaron. That's just two mistakes. There's loads and loads of
I just want to come back on the I'm sorry, let me jump in. What you're saying, Mohammed, is that if we cannot find a contradiction in the Quran, then it's true. Well, I can't find any contradictions in Harry Potter. I can't find any contradictions in The Lord of the Rings. It doesn't mean they're true, does it?
No. Also, it says, does it not say, this is what some people argue, it says at one point, there should be no compulsion in religion, and later on it says, kill all people who are guilty of apostasy. Which is right.
No, the Quran does not say that.
Adam,
It does not say kill people who apostate. The Quran does not say that.
Yes, it does.
No, that's
9:05, is it?
Come on, let's be.
Or was it 9:39?
Let's be civilised and be academic here.
It
does not say kill people who apostatize. The verse is talking about fighting are to do with what we call a justified war theory. It's when you're under attack, you're allowed to defend yourself and to invade invade into countries where people are being oppressed. If you want to talk about violence in the Quran. Now, those contradictions that you mention, name me one academic, one scholar of Islamic studies that says that that is the case. I've not heard anyone. I've not heard anyone say
David Aaronovitch.
Who are non-Muslim.
Hold on, but do you accept that if you had been born in Kerala, you'd probably be Hindu?
Yes, probably.
Exactly. So you could be having the same argument now about
Again, that's a genetic fallacy.
About the Hindu texts and so on. One of the big problems that religions have is their mutual exclusivity. We've already seen some aspects of it. If your book is literally true, his book cannot be. His belief cannot be, the Hindu belief cannot be, and the Buddhist is talking nonsense.
That's a flawed argument.
No, it's hardly a flawed argument.
That's actually a flawed argument.
It's not a flawed argument, because what it shows is how we create different religions that suits us at different times. What about the Book of Mormon? The Book of Mormon has no internal contradictions. Fairly recently created. Joseph Smith had the same kind of visitation, except even more so. He could discern the golden writing on the golden plate wearing a special pair of spectacles, which from behind a screen, he would then dictate to somebody else who took down the Book of Mormon. Mormonism is one of the fastest growing religions in the world.
So you're saying that a diversity
it's better written than the Quran?
There's loads of books that are better written than the Quran. The Quran says it's a miraculous
Harry Potter, you say?
It really is not.
You'll go viral with that if you're not careful.
But if I
did say come to be honest. Gentleman at the back, good morning.
Good morning. I think the majority of the debate has been based around the fact that the front row here is looking at arguments why, God might not exist.
What's your evidence for God?
The way I see it, we assume that we need empirical evidences for God. Empirical evidences don't suggest that, we can have a God without there being empirical evidence for him.
Okay.
That would assume that, you can either definitely believe in God or you can't.
Well, that's an abnegation of the intellect.
He says that, Peter says that's an abnegation of the intellect. Yes, sir, what would you like to say?
This debate has been set up very cleverly to almost caricature this old-fashioned sense that science is rational, and over here on the front row we have a group of irrational people.
Well, this is a rational scientist who believes in God. He's one of the top physicists in the country.
I know, but
he
also nodded when I said that there is an attempt, in a sense, to caricature belief as irrational. Now, there is a difference between saying that something is irrational and non-rational. And you opened the show, Nicky, with a reference to the Higgs and boson Higgs particle. And there is no evidence for that. And yet there is a great deal of belief within the scientific community that it exists. And I'm happy with that. And science enriches my life greatly, as does religion. And there is a sense of harmony in both of these things. And actually, it worries me greatly that the question, is there evidence that God exists, is using a piece of terminology, that being evidence, from the realm of science in a debate which also includes God. It's a bit like trying to ask a cricket umpire to apply the rules of cricket to a game of football.
But what is the alternative? The alternative is simply a discussion of assertion. You simply say, I believe it, my belief is my belief, it's equally valid to anybody else's belief, there we are, end of discussion. we all go about. Is that really the way in which we begin to kind of settle out the big intellectual questions? I think not.
But there is not a richness in actually sitting and shouting very loud.
That's a different matter. Let's not shout.
No one's shouting.
Let's discuss. But
it's all very civil. You should have. Last week's show was shouting. This is very, very civilised. This one.
There is a science of the gaps, isn't there?
Yeah. I think you're right. There's a danger of just being subjective. I say, you say, and so on. It was interesting, the account of Peter Peter Hitchens, the brother of Christopher Hitchens, describing his conversion back to Christianity. And he went to the Soviet Union. And what was very interesting is looking at a society where atheism had been around for 60 or 70 years. And what he noticed was a lack of empathy in everyday life. There was a lack of care. And that he began to realise what a belief in God can do for society over centuries. What happens when that's taken out?
Communism was a form of religion. I was brought up by communist parents, and Marxism was equally structured as a system of beliefs that explained all the world. Actually claimed to be scientific socialism, we called it. It explained the world to each other and so on. The Soviet Union had millions of people in it who, in a sense, were religious.
Yeah, and Carl, you tried to find God. You grew up. You had polio when you were a little boy. You lost your hand in a motorcycle accident. You tried to find God. You went to Lourdes. He wasn't there, was he, for you?
I've seen no evidence for God. I've seen no evidence in my life. I've seen no evidence today. But we have seen something of the Higgs boson last week, by the way.
No, I'm not talking no, go on.
I had a serious motorcycle accident in 1969. Previous to that, I had polio. I've been to Lourdes. I've seen all the crutches hanging up in Lourdes. I went on a whole trainload of disabled people to Lourdes when I was 10 years old. Didn't do much for me, obviously. What astounded me was nobody was cured, and nobody subsequently, since I've been to Lourdes, has had a cure. I doubt anyone ever had a cure at Lourdes. It's just a sham. The whole idea of Lourdes is it's just about money. Religion is a lot about money. I've only once prayed for God. I had an accident at 9:10 on a Monday morning. The ambulance crew swore blind I was dead. They took me to hospital. I was on the table for 9 hours. On Wednesday, if you like, I rose again on the third day. On Thursday, I was in severe agony. So much pain, I did once ask for God. Only once.
Was he there?
I only ever asked for anything once in my life, and he didn't do anything for me.
This is the thing, Stephen. This is the thing. What about those people who ask for God again and again, and he's not there?
Well, this is part of the problem. If there's an expectation that God is going to zap suddenly somebody and say, wow, you're going to have lots of pain today, zap, you're going to be healed today, then we've got back to this notion of God as an old man in the sky with superpowers. And actually, what we've been talking about today is actually, from far as I'm concerned, about a God who has much more to do with that ultimate reality of that sense of awe, that sense of transcendence, that sense of truth and beauty and goodness and love, which is sometimes missing in people's lives. People on this side maybe have found that and want to identify it as God.
Do you think maybe on that side they found it, but they don't recognise it?
On that side, they choose to say, rubbish. But even they've acknowledged that there is there's something about awe and wonder in their lives too. Great, but they don't identify it as God. Let's agree.
I'm afraid we are at the very end. Can you all applaud each other for a pretty civilised affair? Thank you.